anything close to China, but yet we know that 1 in every 7 black people on the earth is a Nigerian. We came here a few days ago, and our purpose of coming was actually to conduct a study tour of China. We received a presidential mandate to conduct an in-depth study on industrialization, energy security, and climate change. But being on this tour gave us the opportunity also to participate in this all-important Inter-civilizational Communication and Global Development Forum, and it is indeed a privilege. It would interest you to note that our institute, the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies in Nigeria, which is Nigeria's apex policy, research and leadership development institution, also houses a Chinese center. And this center was set up to facilitate research and collaboration with the People's Republic of China in view of the country's phenomenal economic growth and its peaceful rise to become the world's industrial powerhouse. And we hope that this study tour will further deepen conversations and collaboration between our two countries. The main aim of our study was to learn firsthand about strategies employed by China to become the world's leading industrial hub, and in addition, we seek to understand the issues and challenges encountered by China in the pursuit of industrialization while seeking to ensure an energy secure future. At the same time, we notice efforts by China, we've received a number of lectures since we came, to promote environmental sustainability. And this is extremely important to Nigeria at a time when our president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has articulated a clear vision for expanding Nigeria's industrial base in order to accelerate economic growth and development. So it is not in doubt that as the world's leading power-generating country, China has a lot to impart by way of policy and strategy to countries like Nigeria aspiring to adopt a similar, self-determined and pragmatic pathway to modernization and national development. Nigeria, like other African countries, is in the process of self-discovery, or should I say self-rediscovery, and of recovery. In the first instance, we seek to recover from a traumatic past. In the second, we seek to rediscover the innovation spark, reminiscent of a noteworthy past, whose civilizing effects are still with us in the modern world, just as our brother, Professor Kelkile, had pointed out, our brother from Ethiopia, had pointed out during the opening ceremony. In his speech also, Eric Solem, if you would recall, during the opening ceremony, the United Nations Under-Secretary, had mentioned periods of humiliation, past periods of humiliation for China. And this preceded China's present rise. This is true for Africa as well. And therefore, China's experience inspires us not to use the past trauma as an excuse for present inaction. And it inspires us also to hope and work for positive change. Today, despite the well-known challenges that Africa faces, as mentioned by Mr. Roy here, our vibrant and diverse cultural heritage is giving rise to emerging and expanding indigenously inspired creations in the entertainment industry, in fashion design, in cuisine, traditional medicine, and uniquely African budding solutions in scientific research and technological startups. So while we acknowledge with great admiration China's remarkable homegrown industrial explosion, we concur with those who say that Africa is the next miracle to rise on the world stage. And friends, this is not just mere wishful thinking. The indicators are already very real. Indeed, the world has a lot to gain from Africa, beyond the scramble for its rich endowments in mineral resources. But for the wealth of Africa, including its deep spiritual and philosophical treasures to work more sustainably for the entire world. There is an urgent need for inter-civilizational communication that revolves around making the wealth of Africa work for the people of Africa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you will probably agree with me, and I've heard this said around the table this morning, that up till now, a lopsided, polarizing, and inequitable global economic order has been projected as the civilization ideal and the modernization pattern that we all should aspire to. But it is forums like this that challenge all of us to reimagine an alternative future of new possibilities where an ethic of mutual care, which is typically African and indeed, as I've heard, Chinese, that predisposes nations to look out not just for their own national strategic interests, but also for the interests of others, so that we all could benefit together. And just like the German Foreign Minister Herta Gemmelin said during the opening ceremony, she joined us in her speech about the need to eliminate underlying injustices in the current global frameworks and practices. We must also challenge any civilization narrative that does not open its heart to all of humanity. So I think we all agree that there is a need to challenge and change the status quo. For one thing, both life and learning teach us that in practice, civilizations and cultures are often constructed around the ideologies and interests of the powerful. Be it at the level of nations, organizations, or even local communities. Civilization often reflects the preferences of the privileged. So there is a growing recognition around the world, especially among emerging young leaders, that we must constantly reflect on how we are shaping civilizations and also hold ourselves accountable to ensure that in substance as well as in effect, these civilizations are equitable, efficient, and sustainable. From an African perspective, I would like to suggest 3 issue areas for inter-civilizational conversations that I strongly believe would move our continent, Africa, faster towards holistic modernization and development, albeit on terms that are suitable and beneficial for our people. And this comes from, these issue areas that I'd like to put forward today comes from taking stock of lessons drawn from our study tour of China and China's particular example, as well as a deep reflection on what could possibly be Africa's philosophical orientation to a homegrown modernization plan. So the first issue area is about human security and making the world a safer place for development. It calls on us to identify and challenge the internal and external interests that continue to fuel terrorism and insurgency and other destabilizing forces on the continent of Africa. It is clear that sometimes those who claim to help us collude with those who are supposed to lead us and end up undercutting our genuine efforts that would otherwise uplift us towards sustainable peace and development. We all know that without security, there can be no meaningful development. The second issue area is migration. We must, as a matter of urgency, and I dare say in the interest of all, find mutually beneficial ways to deal with the negative aspects of human migration and emphasis on negative. Why do we have such a massive migration problem in the world today? This time, not by the direct brutal force of slave trade, although that is also an ongoing issue, you can think of the CNN Freedom Project, but I'm talking about migration by the compelling push and pull factors of economic survival. Friends, the problem is that as Africa loses its people to grain and brown drain, other countries are also losing their grip on their ability to effectively plan for policy and service delivery for their own people. The bleeding of skilled and unskilled labor from Africa is ultimately a lose-lose situation. I certainly admit that migration is one of the most powerful tools for inter-civilizational communication, As societies become melting pots of diversity, exchange, and knowledge sharing. However, we must work together to promote those aspects of immigration that positively accentuate our rich human heritage while preventing the loss of labor power essential to building and sustaining emerging African economies. The third issue, the final issue, has to do with inclusive and participatory development. Just yesterday, we learned from Professor Kuru and Professor Shaw here at the Party School that China has been constructing an ecological civilization, in part to mobilize its full human resource potential for productive citizen participation in the country's modernization and development agenda. This is a key lesson that we take back to Nigeria. It implies that our search for inter-civilizational communication should not stop at the macro level of intergovernmental or even in interagency dialogue. It has to reach out to give value, voice, and visibility to the vulnerable and excluded groups who have been pushed to the periphery of modernization gains. Low-income and rural children, women, youth, ethno-religious minorities, people with disabilities, and even disaffected groups who have opted for violent pursuit of their goals. These must also be around the table of dialogue. It is now conventional wisdom that the stories of the weak and vulnerable and downtrodden must be included in our transformation journey, and their specific priorities, needs and concerns and interests, and even their knowledge, properly factored into our development policies and plans. The artist, Christine Kayo, I was so touched by her speech at the opening ceremony, and she reminded us so aptly that civilizations must communicate through people and with people at the center. So, the leaders of African nations and the global community must bring the socially excluded to the discussion table and tap into our abundant indigenous knowledge systems and envision an alternative reality for a better and brighter future. In conclusion, our delegation will return to Nigeria, hopefully having deepened our relationship with between the National Institute and the Chinese National Academy of Governance, and by extension between our two countries. We feel emboldened by China's example to reject a copycat approach in the quest for environmentally sustainable industrialization. And like China, Nigeria will hopefully, and all of Africa, choose a pragmatic, self-articulated pathway to modernization. It is our sincere hope that this visit to China and our auspicious participation in this conference would produce greater opportunities for information sharing and collaboration between Nigeria and China. So let me once again thank all of us, thank the People's Republic of China and this particular forum for the hospitality, the warmth, the openness, and the practical lessons that we have been able to gain. And on behalf of the entire Nigerian delegation here, we thank you most sincerely. I would want to plead with you to allow me to bring an African civilizational experience to the table. We don't go anywhere without leaving a gift. So I would like to call on my people to bring the gift forward and present to the two leaders at the head of the table. Thank you.